Starting in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to this published author's interview. My name is Kenneth Muyingo, and with me I have a special guest that I will be interviewing. But first, I just want to mention, if you would like to write a book, if you would like to become an author and write your first book, there is a link with this interview. Click on the link and join the group, become an author and write your first book, to connect with like-minded people who are doing the same. And with that said, I would like to get into the interview and ask my guest to say hello to our viewers and listeners.
Hello, I'm John Saunders. It's a pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you so much, John, for making time for the interview. Tell us about yourself. If somebody is watching this interview and they would like to know more about John Saunders, what would you tell them?
Well, I'm an ordained minister. I have credentials through the Southern Baptist Convention. I also have ordination with a non-denominational church, and I was trained with the Assemblies of God. So I've got quite a diverse background as far as that goes. And I'll kind of, I know some of the questions you asked kind of tie into the book, but this ties into it too a little bit.
Yes.
The reason that I wrote my particular book is I just drew on various experiences I had in different churches I worked in, talking about holiness displayed in love. Typically when people talk about this, particularly in church settings, but maybe even outside of it, they talk about it strictly as, rules and regulations. God says this and we have to do this. And yes, that's true to a point, but it's also about what God does on the inside of us. It's about, do we genuinely love someone even when they're broken? Are we willing to minister to that person? Are we willing to work with that person and walk with that person through their struggles? And so really the heart of my book is basically about asking those kinds of questions.
Wow.
When I come across someone, maybe they're struggling with drug addiction or sexual abuse issues, or maybe they had a child out of wedlock. The issues can be many and multifaceted, but the heart of it is, what does it look like to display God's holiness through love to that person? That's really the heart question of my book, and it's based on 1 Corinthians 13.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Holiness displayed in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now more than ever in the world that we're living in, I think love is one of the things that we need more of.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for making time to give us some insight into what you do and your book. Maybe you can tell us more about your book. What is the vision that you have for this book, Holiness Displayed in Love?
Well, my vision would be that, people would read my book and just be inspired to ask questions. I believe that one of the things that the church and society as a whole needs is the idea of, when you see someone struggling with something, uh, don't just look at it and say, okay, this person is doing something maybe they shouldn't do, but ask, what can I do to minister to that person in that place in that time? One of the stories I share about in my book, and I'll kind of pass this on to you and your listeners as well. Years ago, I had a chance to minister in Southern California, and one of the gentlemen that I worked with had AIDS. I'd never actually met anyone up to that point that had AIDS. And it was quite, he told me a story, and it was very moving. He'd done a lot of things in his life that probably weren't the right things to do, but through all of that, he was in a place with me where he's in another city trying to minister to people in need. And I was just deeply impressed with that man.
Wow.
It really touched my heart in terms of understanding, he'd done a lot of things, and part of the things he had done had probably got him into the position to where he got the disease. But here he was trying to minister to people in the inner cities of Los Angeles, California. And I was just deeply moved by his experience. And, that's just something I've carried with me. And just to give you guys some background as to why I wrote my particular book at this particular time, I serve on the board of Christian Berets, which is a camp for disabled kids and adults. And I was asked to do a speaking engagement for them. And I'd already started writing the book at that time. I'd been doing pastoral work for about 15 years at that time, but I was kind of burned out. I just was looking for a different opportunity, a different thing to do. And so I was just trying different ideas about, what could I write about, what could I share. And this concept based on 1 Corinthians 13 just kind of jumped into my heart. And so I used 1 Corinthians 13 to just kind of write out, and I would go through, it's the famous love passage, love is patient, love is kind,
Yes,
love
indeed.
is not self-serving. And I just go through each compartment of that, and I share, and I just share from my life and from my marriage and, raising my daughter and just all these different life experiences. I also have a disability too, so I talk a little bit about that as well. And I just share all of my different observations about, not just what does God say we should do about it, but what can we do to minister to people, and what
Yeah,
does that look like, and be creative, you know.
indeed.
What would
Wow,
the Holy Spirit have us to do? So.
indeed. Amazing. I can't help but remember 1 Corinthians 13:1. If I can understand all the languages of angels, if I can speak the languages of angels and translate all language, but I have not love, I'm nothing. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking, in light of this is, I think, is one of the things that is really essential as far as uh, the human race is concerned. Love is, we are
Mhm.
all, we are seeking to be loved in one way or another, because it's a human essential. It's something that is important to all of us, and yet sometimes we don't get enough of that in the world today. Um, but I'm left thinking, I'm like, there is a lot of topics that you could have looked into. Love is essential, yes. And I'm thinking about uh, a topic such as faith, for example. I'm thinking about
Mhm.
a topic such as wisdom, for example. What
Mhm.
inspired you to focus and write this book about holiness displayed in love?
Well, as I said, I've had a lot of pastoral experience, and sometimes I've seen, my fellow Christians not act in a loving way
Yeah,
in the name of holiness, and I didn't always agree with that. So
yeah,
a lot of what I observed, and I mean, the book really isn't about, I do share some stories about certain experiences I had, but I mean, it's not about really coming down on those folks. It's just as much as asking the question, like, I'll just give you one illustration from the book. I share the story of a young man. When I was probably about 12 years old at the time. I wasn't even a minister then, but I was going to a church, and this young man had just come to Christ. And he came to church one day. He was helping out, and he was wearing a Budweiser T-shirt. He had a T-shirt on with a Budweiser insignia on it,
yeah,
and a lot of the people in the church were upset. They didn't like that. They thought he
yeah,
shouldn't have worn the shirt. And I can kind of understand that. I come from a family where alcoholism is an issue, so I don't particularly like to drink myself. But my thoughts at the time were, I'm just glad the dude's here.
yeah,
I'm glad he's here. I'm
indeed,
glad he's with us. He's he could be out doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and I was just happy he was with us. I'm happy that he was ministering and trying to help out. The fact that he didn't, know all the rules, I guess, for lack of a better term, or understand the culture, the
yeah,
church culture at
indeed,
that time, I thought that was secondary. I said, we can work on all this stuff later.
indeed,
We can deal with this stuff later. I'm just happy that this guy is here. He's helping the older guys in the church do this stuff. He's just happy to be here. God's doing great things in his life. The
indeed,
fact that he's wearing a T-shirt that maybe isn't ideal at this moment is secondary, man.
indeed.
I'm just so happy for what God is doing. And really, thinking about it this way, thinking about faith and holiness and all this stuff, it's really an inside job. Yes, there is an external part of doing what God asks us to do. That's right. But what about the internal part? I mean, can I do something that God wants me to do, but do it for the wrong reason because it makes me look good? because it
Yes,
makes me
it's
look
possible for
spiritual.
us to do the right thing for the wrong reasons, indeed.
Yes, and
Yeah,
and my book deals with that too. And in light of the current, situation with coronavirus too, we're all talking about that. It's in the news all the time now, right?
yeah,
What does that look like? We're kind of in this age where we're trying to figure out how do we address this thing when we can't even really be together like we
yeah,
normally do.
indeed.
Uh, what does it look like to, maybe you send a card to somebody in a hospital. Maybe you
Yeah,
talk to somebody on the phone. Maybe you can't be there physically, but you try everything you can just to try to connect and love and just pour out God's grace to people. See,
indeed.
I believe God's love and his holiness are very intertwined.
Yeah,
I mean, you can look at them separately if you want to, but I think they're intertwined. Even when God says no,
yeah,
he does it because he loves us.
that's right.
He wants to protect and shield and these types of things. So, we need to kind of look at it from that perspective as well.
Wow, I see what you mean. And
Hmm.
I agree with you. I see exactly what you're talking about because, most especially, even I am a Christian myself, and from my own experience, the thing that kept me in church is when I went to church, I was loved. When the time when I became a Christian, I was actually still a smoker. I used to
Hmm.
smoke cigarettes. I used to drink, and
Hmm.
anyhow I used to go to church still. But I was so welcome there, and the thing that kept me going back was the love that I felt. I
Hmm.
felt I felt appreciated. I felt welcomed. I felt valued, but above all, I felt loved. So I really resonate with what you're saying. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thinking about the topic, you said it's based on First Corinthians 13 and some of your life experiences.
Hmm.
Um, is there something you can share with us about how you chose the topic for this book?
You know, I mean, I can't really think of like an epiphany, like, I just have to write about this. But it was mostly just, like I said, I was kind of going through a period where I was a little not burned out on God, but I was burned out on my level of church activity at that point. I was looking for just a different avenue. And so I was trying to think about what could I share with somebody both inside the church and maybe outside that I could give them that I think would be most useful. And this was the issue that just kept coming up because I was trained from the Pentecostal point of view, and they're a holiness church. They believe in holiness. They believe, in strict observance of what God tells us to do.
Yeah,
But I found at times though that just in the way people could do the right things, but it wasn't always in a loving way.
yeah,
You know, I
that's right.
I think you can do the right thing, but do it in a loving way.
Yeah,
You know, don't be so concerned about whether the person is doing exactly what you think, or even if they should be doing. Trust God to do that in their life, in His time and in His way.
wow.
Um, and I have found, at least for myself, when I was young, I used to think that it was my job to fix people, and I realized it's not true. It's God's job to fix people. It's God's job to fix them. It's
That's
my
right.
job to lead them to Him.
And to
That's what
love
my
them.
job is. Yes, yes. And
Yeah,
that's your job. That's everybody's job.
yeah,
And the other takeaway, if I was going to share something that, aside from everything else we've shared, which is pretty potent stuff, right? If I could give you something else, it would be that I hope that if someone reading my book would take away the idea that ministry is not just for clergy. Ministry is for everybody. That's something that I think the body of Christ, we've not everybody, but maybe as a group, we've kind of forgot that. We
yeah,
think that ministry is something that only the trained professional over here does. It's not. If we all embrace ministry and we all embrace reaching out and loving other people, the church, I mean, it already is an incredible place, but it could be even more so. It could be even more so. And I hope that anyone that would read my book would take that away from that experience, because I
I
want them to
see.
see that.
Yeah. Very well said. I think you said it very well as far as this aspect of ministry is concerned. And I think it's the only way for us to be salt that has taste and light that shines. If we understand that we are all in ministry, it's not just about the person who's on the pulpit on Sunday morning, or uh, the one who is an ordained minister.
Hmm.
And I think it's something that is profound, and it's quite a takeaway for me. So thank you so much for that.
Hmm.
Um, my next question: do you consider yourself as a naturally talented writer, or is writing a skill that you've developed over time?
I would say for me, I definitely think that it's a skill that I developed. I've always been told I'm a decent writer, so perhaps I did have a certain gifting to begin with, but I definitely think it's a skill. But I think that's true of anything. You can have a gift, but you have to work the gift. You have to stretch it. You know, I'm kind of an exercise freak. My wife, who's walking to work as we're talking, she's
Yeah,
on the way to the car now. Uh, you know, she thinks I'm a bit of an exercise freak,
yeah,
and she's probably right. I exercise a lot, but you know, I'm a firm believer. Yeah, yes, dear. As you can tell, I'm a married man. I have the most important statement a married man can learn. Yes, dear.
yeah. I will remember that. I'm also a
Yeah,
married man, and I can relate with you because I'm also an exercise freak.
yeah, exactly. You know, because but you know, it's like as far as the gift, you can have a gift of writing or a gift of communication, but you have to work it. You know, you
Indeed.
have to work it, develop it, and you have to experiment with it and see what you can do with it. So I mean, I guess I could say I kind of had a gift to begin with, but I definitely think I've had to work it, as I think we all have to work it. That
Indeed.
makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. I was having an interview with another friend of mine who's
Hmm.
written a book also about, uh, the title of the book is Poverty is Not God's Plan. And in there, he talks about purpose and the gift. Having
Hmm.
that we all have a gift that we have been given from God, and we have a purpose to fulfill. And
Hmm.
and while I was interviewing him, he mentioned the aspect of skill being what you have to do to perfect the gift. That
Hmm.
even when the gift is always there, but you have to work it through skill so that you can perfect it. And I see what you mean when you say this, that it's a skill that you have developed through time, even though you were told earlier on that you had good writing.
Hmm.
So thank you
Yes.
so much for developing the skills that you have developed to be able to give the world the reading material that you have created and what you will create in the future.
Yes, sir.
Um, what would you tell me is the one thing that has happened to you personally that has had the greatest impact on you writing books?
Um, you know, you mean as far as my writing my particular book?
Um,
Uh,
not I mean, like, you personally, because sometimes we go through things in life, and just we get exposed to different experiences, but at a certain point something clicks or something happens, and you're like, I am going to write. I'm going to not just write, but I'm going to write and publish books.
oh
So,
yes. Okay, I see what you mean now. Um, well, to be honest, I kind of wanted to write since I was a little kid, so it's kind of always been there. And I think for this particular book, it was a situation where I was given an opportunity to do a speaking engagement for the board that I'm on. And since I was on the board, I didn't want to ask the board for money. So I said, well, if I can publish my book that I've been working on, would you let me present my book? You know, and if people buy it, that'll be my fee, you know, basically. And so they agreed to let me do that. And so that's kind of what motivated me to finish the book. I'd kind of been tinkering with it for a while, and
Yeah.
and I have to admit, actually writing the book, and you can share this with whoever you want, especially other writers. If I had it to do again, based on what I know right now, I would have finished writing and edit later, because I was trying to write and edit at the same time, and that
Bad
that
idea.
it was a bad idea. Because I kept going back. Well, this doesn't sound right, so I got to fix this and do this, and and so then I got it to a publisher, and we got it done. And it was really, matter of fact, I brought a copy of the book. I'll show it to you before we end the interview.
Very nice.
But I'm really, it was quite an experience. And when I do write, I've been working on, part one of your questions was about what are your future projects, or what are you writing right now? I have a group that I started on Facebook called Talking About Holiness in a Personal Way, and I just put little comments in there every day. I'm probably going to turn that into a devotional. So that's my next project.
Talking about holiness in a personal way.
Yeah, yeah, and just basically what it is. It's thoughts, not a long theological treatise, but just little thoughts, like Bible verses and comments about, just encouraging you, and remembering that, even when you fail, God's there. He's there to pick you up. He's there to be with you and encourage you. And he's working this out in you. This isn't about you. It's about what he's doing in you.
Indeed.
So that's kind of my next project that I'll be working on. So,
Wow.
but yeah,
Holiness in a personal way. That is quite something. I can relate with the issue that you mentioned about writing and editing at the same time.
yeah,
It's a trap that I fell into as well when I was writing my first book.
yeah.
And I learned that I shouldn't do that. It's you
I mean,
almost never get to finish.
well, yeah, and that I said, and I did it for a while, but I was like, man, I just got to finish this thing. I'll clean it up later. I just got to finish this thing, and then I'll clean it up, and
Yeah,
then I'll give it to the publisher, and they can clean it up even better than I can.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
So,
Wow.
so, so that's what I did.
Wow, thank you so much. So holiness in a personal way, that is the project that you're working on currently.
Yes, it's actually, it's a Facebook group. I know one of the questions you had, if anyone wanted to contact me, how could they do that? If you're on Facebook, just ask to join the group, and you can kind of see what I'm doing. I haven't actually, I mean, I've been doing this now for 3 or 4 years, so I've got tons of material to work with.
Yeah, very nice.
So,
We will put the link to the Facebook group with the interview. And
mhm.
how can people connect with you besides the Facebook group?
um, it's interesting. I don't actually have a web page. I should. I don't. My publisher has a page that has a picture of my book on it. Probably the best way would be to go through the group, and then if you wanted to ask me questions or ask for personal contact, I could give it to you there.
Very
Um,
nice.
I am a member of Big Valley Grace in Modesto, California, a big evangelical church there. Um, and I'm also on the board of Christian Berets in Modesto as well. So that's a couple different ways people can find me.
Very nice. And
So
where can people buy your book?
you can buy it online. It's set up to be it's on demand. So when you order it, it gets put together at that time. But you can also, it's an audiobook form as well. So you can download it to your phone. So
Okay.
depending on whatever you like, if you want the printed copy, which I'll show you, you can have that. If you want, a download to your phone, you can have that. Now the download's a little cheaper than the paperback. So, if you like that, that's good.
Yeah. So the book is on
So
Amazon?
yeah, it's on Amazon,
Very nice.
Goodreads, Barnes and Noble, and it's through Halo Publishing International. You can go to their webpage and look it up there as well. And I'll just show you a picture of it.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes. Holiness is displayed in love. True
Yeah.
holiness is displayed in love. I see it. Very
Yes.
nice.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So, and
Wow.
this, just to give you some background on the picture on the front of the book here, this picture was taken at Centenary United Methodist Church in Modesto. My wife and I were married there, and I always loved the stained glass there. So I asked them if I could use their picture on the book,
Yeah.
and they said yes. So as long as I
Wow.
gave them credit, which I did.
Very nice. Oh,
Yes.
wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Saunders, for making time for this interview. I really appreciate. I just wanted to ask before I end the interview, is there anything else that you would like to mention that I have not touched on in the interview?
You know what? I think you've done a really good job. I would just say, get my book. And one other thing, in the back of my book, I actually have some of the questions that I talk about listed there that you can kind of ask yourself when you're reading the book, and just think about, what are the areas that God needs to work on in my life so I can truly display His holiness and love. That's the heart of the whole thing right there. Um, so, that would be just my takeaway to anybody that sees this. And you're welcome to check out my group if you like, or go to my publisher's website as well. And you can, friend me on Facebook, but you might want to tell me it has to do with the book so I know who you are.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. And
All
you
right.
can friend me too, man. I'd love to see you on Facebook.
Most
So
definitely, we will connect. Thank you so much, Mr. Saunders. It's been a pleasure as well as a privilege for me to do this, and we will sure keep in touch.
absolutely. Thank you too, sir. Have a blessed day.
Have